From the outside, my life seemed perfect. Andres was the ideal husband. Always attentive, loving, and thoughtful. Together we had built an enviable home, full of laughter, good times, and the promise of a carefree future. However, something had changed. The first thing I noticed were the calls at odd hours. Andres would always find an excuse: work meetings, emergency calls from his company, or important meetings. At first, I trusted him. There was no reason to doubt. But curiosity began to gnaw at my insides. One night, while Andres was sleeping soundly, I decided to take his phone. My heart was pounding as I slid my finger across his screen. What I found was not what I expected. No, romantic messages from another woman, but something more disturbing: encrypted conversations with unknown numbers. The words were cryptic, talking about deliveries, safe routes, and reliable contacts. My mind tried to rationalize what I was seeing, but something told me that Andrew was not who I thought he was. That night, I couldn't sleep. The man with whom I had shared years, the same man who claimed to love me, was hiding a dark secret. The next day, I tried to act normal. Andres smiled at me as he always did, but I no longer saw the same man. It all seemed like a facade, a lie. Everything seemed like a facade, a lie. How long had he been cheating on me? Not in the traditional sense, but something much worse. What was Andres really doing? That same night, I decided to follow him. I knew that if I wanted to find out the truth, I would have to act fast, without him noticing. I prepared myself mentally for whatever it was I would find, but I could never have imagined what was to come. My heart was pounding as I followed him silently. Andres had said he had a work meeting, but instead of heading to the office, he took a detour downtown. I saw him park near a disreputable nightclub, a place I would never have imagined he would go. I waited a few minutes before getting out of my car and slipped in behind him, trying to pass unnoticed in the crowd. Inside the club, the atmosphere was dark and dense. Smoke and flickering lights barely let me see, but I managed to make out Andres sitting at a table in the back, surrounded by men who looked nothing like his usual coworkers. I got close enough to hear snatches of their conversation. They were talking about shipments, safe routes, and large sums of money. My stomach churned as I listened. Andres was not in a simple business meeting. He was involved in something much shadier. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone to secretly record. I didn't know what I was doing, but something inside me told me I would need proof. Andrew was not the man I thought he was, that much was clear. But what I discovered next was even more terrifying. Between the low voices and muffled laughter, one of the men mentioned the people, a vague term that left me cold. What people were they talking about? I tried to keep listening, but at that moment Andrew got up from the table, heading for the back door of the club. I decided to follow him. My heart was pounding and adrenaline was coursing through my veins. I had never done anything so dangerous. If Andrew saw me, it would all be over, and I wasn't sure what I would do if he found out I was following him. But I needed to know more. I couldn't remain ignorant. I saw him stop in an alley, talking to someone who looked like a security guard. I couldn't hear well, but one thing was clear: Andres was involved in something illegal, and I could no longer ignore it. After following him and discovering what he was doing, fear and uncertainty took hold of me. I could no longer see Andres in the same way. My mind was torn between the need to confront him and the terror of what might happen if I did. That night, I went home before he did, lay in bed, and pretended to be asleep when he arrived. I felt his kiss on my cheek, and I almost shuddered in disgust. How could I go through with this deception? I loved him, or at least I loved the person I thought he was. But now it all seemed like a lie. It was days before I decided to confront him. I couldn't pretend anymore. I knew I had to talk to him, but when I did, his response took my breath away. Andres didn't deny it. He didn't even try to disguise his surprise. I knew you'd find out sooner or later, he told me with a coldness I'd never seen in him. He told me everything, his connection to a criminal network, the jobs he did for them. But what chilled my blood the most was the last thing he said. Stay out of this, because if you do, you won't make it out alive. My body trembled. The threat was clear. Andres was not only involved in dangerous business, but he was also warning me that if I tried to stop him, if I tried to expose him, I would be in danger. I felt my world crumbling. The man I loved, with whom I shared my life, was willing to hurt me if I didn't play by his rules. From that moment on, I knew I was trapped in a deadly game. I could trust no one. Andrew was watching me, always watching my every move. But I knew I couldn't sit idly by. I had decided that I would confront him, not as his wife, but as a woman who had been betrayed to the core. I was going to fight for my freedom, for my life, even if it meant destroying everything we had built. After that confrontation with Andres, his threats stuck in my mind. I knew I couldn't just run away or pretend everything was fine. Andres controlled everything, from my movements to our finances. But I wasn't willing to give up so easily. If I wanted my life back, I would have to act in the shadows, just like him. I started investigating on my own, secretly, when he was away. I searched his office, checked emails and bank records, anything that might give me a clue as to who he was working with. One night, I found what I was looking for, a name and address. It belonged to a man named Ricardo, a shady lawyer who seemed to be one of the middlemen in Andres' criminal network. I knew that talking to him would be dangerous, but I had no choice. The day I decided to contact him, I was overcome with fear. My heart was pounding as I walked to the meeting place. We met in a quiet cafe, a place discreet enough to avoid suspicion. Ricardo, an intimidating-looking man, looked at me curiously as I sat down across from him. I couldn't show fear, so I got straight to the point. I know what Andres does. I know he's involved in something big. But I want to stop him, I said with a firmness that surprised me. Ricardo arched an eyebrow, smiling disdainfully. And why should I care? He replied coldly. Because if you don't help me, I'll go public with everything I know, I threatened, showing him the recording I had obtained at the club that night. His smile disappeared instantly. I knew I had him trapped. Ricardo leaned forward, lowering his voice. If you really want to take down Andres, it won't be easy. But maybe we can help each other. I didn't know at the time what he meant, but his tone suggested something dangerous. He had started a deadly game, one he didn't know if he could win, but there was no turning back now. After that meeting with Ricardo, things started to move quickly. I knew I couldn't fully trust him, but for now our goals coincided. Andres had betrayed more than just my trust, and now his criminal network was beginning to turn against him. Ricardo offered me his help, but in exchange, I would have to give him incriminating evidence that could bring down Andres and his allies. Over the next few weeks, I became a spy inside my own home. Andres was more absent than ever, which made it easier for me to continue gathering information. However, every time I saw him, I noticed a change in his demeanor. He seemed more tense, more controlled. He even went so far as to ask me if everything was all right, with a look that tried to penetrate my thoughts. I pretended that everything was normal, but inside me, the tension grew. One night, while he slept, I once again ventured into his office. I found documents detailing transactions and names of people involved in his organization. I took photographs of everything, sending them to Ricardo in an encrypted file. But just when I thought everything was going according to plan, I heard a noise behind me. My heart stopped. I slowly turned around and, to my surprise, there was Andres, watching me with a chilling calmness. "What are you doing here?" he asked in a soft but menacing voice. I swallowed saliva, trying to keep my composure. "I was looking for some papers for work," I lied, holding his gaze. He took a step toward me, every muscle in his body tense, like a predator stalking its prey. "You know you can't lie to me, right?" I didn't answer. I knew I was in danger. Andres moved closer, his face just inches from mine. "I hope you're not doing anything you'll regret," he whispered before turning and leaving the room. I stood there, trembling. I knew time was running out. The final confrontation was coming, and I had to be ready. After that night, I knew I was no longer safe in my own home. Andres was suspicious. I could feel it in every look, in every word we exchanged. I knew I had to act quickly before he took the lead. Ricardo had warned me that Andres was more dangerous than he seemed, and that if I wanted to defeat him, I would have to use his same tactics. The plan was in motion. Together with Ricardo, we discovered that Andres had an important meeting with the leaders of the criminal organization to which he belonged. It was the perfect opportunity to obtain enough evidence to destroy him. However, Andres was no fool, and he knew I was close to discovering everything. I was sure he would do something to protect himself. That night, as Andres prepared for his meeting, something in me changed. The woman who had been the victim of her husband's lies no longer existed. Now, I was ready to face the truth, no matter how dark it was. I knew Andres would stop at nothing to protect his secret, but I wouldn't stop either. Following Ricardo's instructions, I bugged Andres' office before he left. When the time came, I watched from a distance as he met with his team in an abandoned warehouse. Through the audios, I listened as they discussed removing certain obstacles, including Ricardo. What Andres didn't know was that I was listening to every word. "Everything must be clean by tomorrow," said Andres coolly. "No trace. If anyone suspects, it will be the end." Those words gave me chills. He was planning something big, and I was in the middle of his trap. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. With evidence in hand, I sent the file to Ricardo and the authorities anonymously. Andres' time was running out, and soon he would pay for every lie, every crime. The hours following the delivery of the tests were pure tension. Andres returned home late that night, and his attitude was cooler than ever. He seemed to know that something had changed. He walked around the house with an eerie calm, like a hunter stalking his prey, and I couldn't help but feel that he knew what he had done. But the worst was yet to come. The next day, as I was driving to work, I noticed a black car following close behind me. My heart raced, and my mind began to formulate escape plans. Ricardo's warnings echoed in my head. Never underestimate Andres. He always has a plan. I knew something was very wrong. In a desperate move, I turned sharply around a corner and accelerated, trying to lose the car following me. But it wasn't enough. The car closed in on me, forcing me to stop. Two men got out of the vehicle and headed toward me with menacing looks. My mind was blank, desperately searching for a way out. Just when I thought all was lost, a third car appeared, blocking the men. It was Ricardo. He had arrived just in time. I hadn't realized how close the danger was, but now I knew Andres wasn't playing around. The sound of the car doors closing made me turn my head towards Ricardo, who quickly got out of the vehicle, with an expression of urgency on his face. The two men who had cornered me didn't seem willing to back down, but Ricardo gave them no choice. He pulled out a gun, pointing it directly at them, forcing them to back slowly toward his car. "Get out now," Ricardo shouted, keeping his gaze fixed on the men. They exchanged a warning glance before turning and disappearing into the black car. Within seconds, the engine roared and the vehicle vanished into the distance. My body trembled with fear, my hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. I couldn't believe what had just happened. Andres had sent those men after me. There was no doubt about it. Ricardo quickly approached my car, opening the passenger door. "We have to move," he said in a tone that brooked no argument. His eyes showed concern, but also the resolve of someone who had seen this kind of situation before. "What's going on?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling, barely containing my panic. "Andres knows you betrayed him. Today was just a warning. He's not going to stop until he silences you." My hands trembled as I put the car in gear, following Ricardo's directions. We sped away from the scene, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the full weight of the situation fall on me. It was no longer just a matter of gathering evidence or uncovering the truth. Now, it was about survival. During the drive, Ricardo explained everything to me. Andres was not only involved in criminal activities. His network extended far beyond what I could have imagined. From corrupt officials to businessmen, Everyone was connected, and destroying Andres meant dismantling an entire organization. There were people willing to kill to protect that empire, and now I had become the target. Andres is not only a criminal, he is a master manipulator. If we want to defeat him, we're going to need something much bigger than a few pieces of evidence, said Ricardo, as he reviewed some documents on his cell phone. I knew he was right. We were in real danger, and the only way to get out of this alive was to confront Andres and his allies once and for all. But how to do it without losing our lives in the attempt? We took refuge in a safe place, a small apartment that Ricardo had prepared for cases like this. We could not stay in one place for long. I knew Andres had eyes everywhere, and it wouldn't be long before he tracked us down. I felt the weight of each passing minute, the clock ticking relentlessly toward the inevitable confrontation. Ricardo and I spent hours working on a plan. The only way to stop Andres was to expose him publicly. It was no longer just a matter of handing over the evidence to the authorities, because I knew that much of it was under their control as well. We needed to make the scandal so big that no one could ignore it. As we discussed our options, a frightening thought popped into my mind. I knew where Andres kept the most incriminating documents, in a hidden safe in his personal office inside our house. But the house was no longer a safe place. If he wanted access to that safe, he would have to be quick and cunning. We have to get into the house and get those documents out, I said quietly, knowing how dangerous it would be. Ricardo looked at me as if I were crazy. Are you sure? If they catch you, it will be the end. Andres won't give you a second chance. But there was no other option. It was a risk I had to take. With Ricardo's help, we planned how to get into the house undetected. Andres was away that night, in another of his meetings with his associates, and we knew we would have little time before he returned. That night, as I prepared to face the danger, my mind was torn between fear and determination. I knew that everything depended on that last move. If we failed, our lives would end there. If we succeeded, we could dismantle Andres' empire and expose him to the world. The house was silent when we entered. Every step I took echoed in the void, amplifying my nervousness. I knew exactly where the safe was, but with each passing second, I felt the danger getting closer. We arrived at Andres' office, and my hands were shaking as I entered the security code. I had memorized the combination on one of my previous attempts, and on the third try, the safe door opened. Inside, I found what I was looking for, a folder full of documents detailing illegal transactions, names of people involved, and enough evidence to convict Andres. Just when I thought we had made it out unscathed, the door to the house burst open. Andres stood there, looking at me with a mixture of fury and surprise. I knew it was the endgame, but I wasn't about to give up without a fight. I knew you would do something stupid like this, said Andres in a calm but dangerous voice. But I never thought you would go this far. You destroyed everything, Andres. What we thought was a marriage, what I thought was love, everything has been a lie, I answered, with the folder in hand. Before Andres could act, Ricardo appeared behind me, gun in hand. The tension was palpable, and I knew we were on the verge of chaos. This ends today, said Ricardo, pointing the gun at Andres. For an instant, Andres seemed to hesitate, but his arrogance would not allow him to accept defeat. Do you think you can destroy me with this? You don't understand the power I have. If you destroy me, others will take my place. Maybe, I replied, approaching with the folder held high. But at least you won't be in charge anymore. With a last movement, Ricardo shot at Andres' leg, making him fall to the ground. We didn't kill him because we knew the evidence in the folder would speak louder than any bullet. With Andres down, Ricardo and I escaped, handing over the evidence to the authorities and exposing his criminal network to the public. Andres' downfall was swift and devastating. The empire he had built over the years crumbled in a matter of days. But despite the victory, my heart was still broken. I had loved a man who did not exist, a man whose betrayal had changed my life forever. Justice had been served, but the price was higher than I could have ever imagined. If you got caught up in this intense story of betrayal, deceit, and justice, don't forget to subscribe for more stories full of unexpected twists and thrills. Like us and turn on the little bell so you don't miss the next stories full of suspense and drama. See you in the next video.